Onyeka Valentine, and today our discussion is centered on how Nigerian states can grow without depending on federal government allocation. Is that possible? We can find out. Available data shows that the Federal Account Allocation Committee, FAAC, disbursed a total of 15.26 trillion naira to the federal, state, and local governments in 2024. It says, in what marked a significant 43% increase from the 10.9 trillion naira allocated in 2023. Yes, there was a surge. It says the surge was largely attributed to the fiscal reforms, including removal of fuel subsidies and exchange rate adjustment, which enhanced oil revenue remittance. Of this allocation, Lagos received the highest allocation with 531.1 billion naira, followed by Delta State, number 2, at 450.4 billion naira. Now, River State comes in number 3 at 349.9 billion naira, while Nasarawa received on the 4th position the list at 108.3 billion naira. It goes on to say the sources of this allocation includes revenue from the statutory account, exchange gain, electronic money transfer, levy, and value-added tax. These monthly allocations have left almost all states, apart from Lagos and Rivers, heavily dependent on FG for their survival, including payment of workers' salaries. So today, we're examining how and what state government can do to depend less on FAAC to drive development in their local economies and offer improved governance. Our guest on the show today is quite interesting. Is Dr. Oluyemi Adeosun, BusinessDay's chief economist. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
Morning to you.
Excited to be here again.
Pleasure's ours, pleasure ours. I will tell you, with everything going on in Nigeria, the economy, like they say, is hitting left and right. With what we have, where do you see us heading to?
Well, that's a multi-headed question.
Right.
But as Nigerians, we must remain optimistic, even though we try to be realistic. Again, it's not negotiable at some point that reforms are inevitable.
Right.
All we just want is for it to be sustainable, so that we don't have some of the challenges of the past where you have policies somersault or due to political exigency, unnecessary interference. So if we can weather, so to speak, this economic storm, and then we can emerge to a limelight that things will begin to shape up.
Things will begin to shape up. You heard from the doctor. Let's get straight into our major questions.
Yeah.
Now, apart from Lagos, Rivers, and maybe 2 other states, from my analysis here, the rest includes some of oil-producing states that can hardly survive without FAAC. What is your view, what do you think is largely responsible for this issue that we have? Because I'm seeing my indices here, and it's not normal. So what do you think is responsible for this abnormal situation?
So thank you so much. Permit me to be blunt and frank.
Please. They say hit the nail on the head.
Yes, and I'm talking to and about all of us.
Right.
Not just any stakeholder now.
Right.
I think to some extent we are laid back. I'm trying to avoid using the word lazy. So let's leave it as we are laid back. And it is perhaps a continental problem. And I will explain very quickly. So because we are so blessed, our blessings has made us lazy. And I will use one example.
That's a very strong word, lazy.
Yes. Let's use the agricultural sector.
Right.
If you look at Nigeria, at every point in time, there's always a fruit or some fruits in season. There's always a fruit or some fruits
in season.
So why do you need to preserve? Why do you need to convert available fruits, process them, put them in cans, bottles for a later day? But in some other climes, they don't have this kind of luxury. So if they don't, for example, preserve, if they don't enhance, they will go hungry. So we are used to something will always be available. And there are different proverbs. People will tell you that, have you seen a chicken struggle to feed? Ever? How much more we humans? So we are laid back. And this oil boom, sometimes economics will say maybe it is leading to an oil cost of some sort. But let's quickly go across the continent. Dubai is blessed with oil.
And they come from a sandy prone area.
Absolutely.
No.
But can you see their intentionality with respect, for example, to tourism, making the city a commercial center? If you know anybody today, for every 100 Nigerians that have gone to Dubai today, they didn't go to buy oil.
I have a question for you, Brian.
Yes, please.
Just in between questions.
Yes.
I mean, the statistics have shown that it took Dubai less than 50 years to become the Dubai of today.
Yeah.
And people are trooping there, giving that country a lot of GDP value. I mean, with what you think is going on here in Africa, do you think that's going to be possible? And they turned that place from a desert, fast rising to something greater. What do you think?
So if we cast our mind back to say 1950, 1955, and you ask the same question about Dubai, it will look impossible. All we require is intentional leadership and political will and the ability to galvanize. Again, without diverting, still on the same topic. So a few years ago, I went to
Obudu Cattle Ranch?
Yes, and then I went to Tinapa. Then a few years after, I went to the same Obudu and to the same Tinapa.
Has there been any major difference?
Brother, the second time I went, I wept.
Oh my goodness. Tourism. If doctor says he wept, which means things spiraled out of control.
Deteriorated, lack of continuity. What Donald Duke put in place, instead of successive government consolidating,
It was mismanaged.
it was neglected. Again, what's the problem? There's FAAC and there's oil.
So in an event where FAAC doesn't come in as their savior, what happens? The state will just
Then
pack up.
we become stranded. So the lack of risk management is just like the average employee today. That is a family man or woman. There's what we call side hustle. Of course, you ensure that it's not conflicting with your mainstay. What happens the day your organization has cash flow problems and they delay salary by 2 weeks? Will your children go hungry for that 2 weeks? So what's the risk management we are putting in place? We also need to look at the caliber of employees working for these governments. What's their mindset? Are they people that are enterprising in orientation? Are they people that want to come and bake a cake, or they just want to come and share an existing cake?
Share an existing cake. I'll come back on that.
Yes.
That sounds more interesting for me. This second one is going to open more light to that. It says, so we know there's an issue with our structural, constitutional issues that plague us every now and then. But I want to know, what structural or constitutional factors contribute to the physical centralization in Nigeria's federal system? Having in mind that you spoke about, employees and, institutions just laying back, hoping that FAAC will bail them out.
To be very frank, and this is personal opinion, I don't think it is structural. It is people. There is no system of government, for example, or nation structure that you can't find 1, 2, 3 examples of countries succeeding. So if you say capitalism, for example, you say US. If you say maybe socialism, and you say China. So it is about the people and their intent. It's not about, are we using regional government? Are we using central government? No. If there is no type of government structure we choose to use, with the current mindset, if we think through the lens of corruption, vested interest, it's not going to work.
It's not going to work. With that, do you think there's a big problem regarding some of our Nigerian states and, the allocation they give to them, do you think is robust enough for them to be able to say they can invest? I mean, we know there are issues surrounding, salary being paid on time. Sometimes they owe them arrears, months. Civil servants are working without salaries. This so-called state allocation given to them from our oil boom, unfortunately, agriculture, like rightly said, has just been almost relegated to the background. Not speak about the fact that you travel to Obudu cattle ranch and you see that the whole thing is just, it's deplorable. Unlike how it used to be before then when Donald Duke was there. Looking at all this, do you think the federal government should say, you know what, let's give you guys more money, or cut off funding and say, states, fund yourself?
You see, I will defer to the later.
Okay.
See, more money will lead to more mental laziness. And it's shortchanging us in the long term. You see, we need to transit from a rent-seeking economy to a productive economy. When a state cannot pay salaries, now, apart from the fact that if it is due to corruption or mismanagement of resources, the question is, are you even overstaffed?
Are you even overstaffed? I didn't even think about that part.
And are your existing staff productive? Because I know that in government, not all sections are revenue generating, but with some mindset, with some innovation. So if you have government hospitals, you can have two sides of the government hospital, the private wing and the public wing. If you have a government university, for example, if Lagos State decides to build 2 additional universities that will be fully commercial and retain 1 or 2 as current public, who is stopping us? Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Yes.
So I'm not saying commercialize everything, but you can have, so if, for example, you do Fort Mainland Bridge and you tow it, nobody will complain because it's a new window. So it's those kind of mindset. Again, let me use another unpopular one. How are we optimizing fines as a means of revenue? Fines.
Very key.
Very key. But the challenge is, and this is an educated guess, maybe 50 to 70% of fines, instead of get paid into the government coffers as fines, enter into the private pocket of the officials.
But will it be properly managed? Will it be proper accountability?
So that's where transparency comes in. We need to have systems where, imagine a situation where maybe on a dashboard online, everybody in a local government, in the state government, can track the revenue daily. And they can track the expenditure. So we have an idea of how much you are paying for salaries, wages. We have an idea of the capital projects that are ongoing. Transparency, opacity supports corruption. And, it weakens trust. And that's why then the system, I'll give you an example. So if you violate a traffic law, look at the system put in place to get you to pay.
Is the system
It
viable?
is almost easier to settle the officer than to go and pay. For example, they will say they will first of all take you to a station which may be 4 or 5 kilometers away from where the offense was committed. On arrival there, they will remove or deflate the 4 tires.
Making it more difficult for you to...
Then God help you if it's a Friday. Then they will now say you have to go to the bank. God help you if you are arrested at 4 p.m. But imagine there's a way you have find a ticket, there's a device, you swipe your card and you move on. Some of these fines are actually cheap, maybe 5,000.
Which brings me to another question.
Yes.
Do you think it's possible that such payment structure actually do exist, which they do, but somewhat way, someone somewhere is subventing everything, trying to make it more difficult, knowing that if it's difficult for you to go through some rigorous process, you want to give cash on the backhand?
I suspect that's part of the reason. And people who should be thinking about how do we simplify payment access won't subscribe to automation because it will edge them out of the equation.
Out of the equation, my research here is showing something different. Yes. It says, and this again is targeted towards, the sharing play in fostering dependency, right? So if we're going to look at that angle, the question is, how do you think natural resource control will help, mitigate that area where those who are dependent on a particular amount of money given to them monthly, right, begin to say, you know what, we want to take this money, invest in our state, and give you return. Do you think that those returns, if well managed, can supersede the amount given to them? Is it monthly, is it annually? However, the money is being disbursed. Is this possible?
The challenge is still mindset. If we give you the money, what about if it disappears?
That's another point.
How do we determine the kind of investment we are going to put it into? Do you have a professional constituted investment board? Ideally, that should have been the interest. There's something Bill Clinton said way back when he paid a visit to Nigeria that has stuck with me. He said, it is not what is under your feet that counts, but what is in your mind.
What's in your mind? The mindset.
Japan. Is it oil? The good thing is, all regions of Nigeria, we have people. Can we begin to think? Because that's the greatest resource, and we are not using it.
Human capacity.
Look at what do you have? Is it agriculture? Do you have waterways? And how can we monetize it? And this is the question we must ask. Take sports. Can we create facilities? If you go to National Stadium, you will cry. How can, in a state of 20 million people, how can the National Stadium be like that? Is it that people are not willing to pay to use the facilities? But it is because some people's salary gets paid. So what is the performance management framework for the officials of the government?
Like they say, if you ask me now, who I go ask? Moving on, very quickly. This part is more interesting. It kind of gives a boys quarter window view of what we just mentioned. It says here, now, how does the lack of economic diversification at state level contribute to physical dependency on the federal government? Someone just sent me this question right now on one of our platforms, and they want to know, Doc, do you think that, dependency on federal government, the physical dependency on federal government at some point can be pulled off without the state losing its bearing?
Look,
the Yorubas will say, show what possible.
Even the federal government needs to be careful.
Okay.
We are sitting on a
gunpowder.
Yes. Look at the recent reduction in crude oil price from maybe 70, 75 to 60, 65. It makes us very vulnerable. And that is why what Dubai is doing, they are increasingly diversifying. We should not assume that this oil
will last forever.
One, even if it lasts forever, that the people working on technology, alternative energy sources,
will need it forever.
Electric vehicles, will need it forever. So you may even own it forever. What if we move on?
It becomes valueless.
It becomes valueless. We shouldn't always wait on 2-3 countries going on war to spike up this price. So while we have it right now, we should use it. And thinking is very important. Critical thinking. What can we use it for? For example, can we build universities that will attract people from all over the world?
Can we build universities that
will attract people? Can we build hospitals? People go to India today for medical treatment. Can we build hospitals that people will come from all over the world? Can we have sports academies that players, athletes will be exported all over the world?
Sports tourism.
Can we revive the Obudus of Nigeria? Or all the waterfalls in Rijesha? Can we make Lagos a 24-hour city? Instead of working 8 to 5, why can't Lagos be a 24-hour organization? Where all organizations are running shifts.
Output and productivity will be fantastic.
Why must we all sleep at the same time in a city like Lagos?
Mega city.
And what happens when you come up with these initiatives? More people to pay tax, more employment, more revenue, more businesses. So it's about thinking, critical thinking.
So you're saying now that one of the things that could be a curative measure to our, level in which tax is being generated in mega cities like Lagos one of the reasons why we haven't moved above the point is because we are not maximizing work hours in Lagos State.
We are not.
On that premise, another question that has been sent through. This one here says, what political incentives or disincentives discourages states from pursuing financial independence? One of our listeners and viewers have sent this one. Do you think it's even possible to start with?
It is. However, you need to have a coalition of support. So that what happened in Cross River will not happen. What do I mean? You can put things in place. If you exit, what happens? So let's take Lagos. At least let's use this example like in a positive light.
Strategy.
See the way, I won't mention the brand, a tax firm was brought to shore up revenue in Lagos. Notice that tax firm is still running it 20, 30 years later.
Should it be so?
Let's leave that for another conversation. But what I'm driving at, one thing you will notice is that increasingly they have been improving the revenue.
Right.
But imagine they were changing every 4 years. Even though some people can argue that maybe there are other things we are not aware of, but that's not the matter. So I'm trying to say, Lagos, I'm not talking politics now, I'm talking from Ashiwaju template and continuous continuity. If Donald Duke to add that continuous handshake, if Cross River had decided that we'll be the tourist capital of Africa, who knows where we'll be today?
It'll be a different story. What you just said right now qualifies that saying that, the typical African saying that if you want the food to be cooked on time, then stop changing firewood unnecessarily. Let it burn consistently. Burn consistently. I hope our nation will never burn. Rather, let us grow. Speaking about growth, more questions are coming your way. I know you're well equipped with these things. And of course, in case you don't know, we'll be speaking with Dr. Oluyemi Adeosun, our in-house BusinessDay chief economist. No one knows it better than he does. And you can catch him on social media. What's the social media handle?
Check me out on Tallest Niger.
Tallest Niger. You'll find out why they call him Tallest Niger. If he stands up right now, I still probably wouldn't accommodate him. He's a tall gentleman, fine at that. More questions coming your way. It says here that, it says, to what extent does poor governance and corruption at the state level exacerbate reliance on federal allocations? This must be a very smart person.
Very. Again, poor governance leads to poor accountability.
Right.
We are not able to track. We are not able to measure. We are not even sure what the specific goals and indicators for measurements are. So what do we look up to? So if after your term in office you say you have tried, how do we know whether you have tried or not tried? And again, opacity, lack of transparency, shrouding things in secrecy helps makes this thing thrive.
Kind of
and it's
cloak and dagger kind of
it's counterproductive, and that is why some NGOs, for example, globally now are asking for open governance, and that's why I give credit to, for example, institutes like Budget IT, always trying to spotlight the budget because it's a public document. What do we say we will do?
Should we keep on padding or refuse to pad?
Or refuse to pad. Then the sources of income. So when we say, oh, this national budget is hinged on oil benchmark of, please, can we ask state government, what is your own budget hinged on?
Right.
Should a non-oil producing state be hinging its budget too on oil price? Does that make rational sense?
It's a question that creates a lot of light bulbs on it.
Yeah.
State governors, if you're listening, our key analyst has asked a key question. Think it through. More questions coming before we call it a wrap here. It says, if I'll call it last for the list, or list for the last, how would I call it? It says, Doc, is it possible that in 10 years, Nigeria could have been more sustainable and debt-free 100%? Can Nigeria be debt-free in the next 10 years 100%? Having in mind that, I don't know if how verifiable it has been, that the president said that some of our debt has been covered, if not all. But in the next 10 years, can we remain like that, debt-free?
So the sustainable part,
Yes.
I like that. The debt-free, I have a slightly different opinion.
Please shoot.
Point at any successful organization that is, in quote, debt-free.
Right.
So it's also there's what we call other people's money.
Right.
So if you have 1 billion naira, you can meet your needs, but you have credibility. You can leverage additional 1 billion naira. Right. Why should you trade with only 1 billion when you can trade with 2 billion? So the thing with debt is debt for what?
Debt for what?
For example, look at the Lagos Ibadan. Since that road has been train has been done, I've never driven to Ibadan. Over 34 years now. If it was debt that got us Lagos Ibadan, please, can you get more?
Can we get more debt?
And it's not a free train service. Just make sure that the debt is what? Sustainable, reasonable. Let us have adequate feasibility as to how we will pay the debt. So as long as you are not defaulting on your debt and your debt to GDP ratio is reasonable, within a reasonable threshold, you are fine.
But does this make us captives to the IMF?
Again, you negotiate your terms and conditions.
You negotiate your terms and conditions, ladies and gentlemen. I must tell you, Doc, that's been wonderful having you.
Thanks so much, sir.
I wanted to be on the show like every other day. This big story without you couldn't have made more sense than it should have. As far as I'm concerned, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great stuff. We'll be talking to Dr. You know him already. Oluyemi Adeosun. Did I pronounce your name properly?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. You can find him on social media at
Tallest Niger
and
Oluyemi Adeosun on YouTube.
Fantastic. You cannot miss it for the world. All right. So thank you so much for staying with us on the big story. Don't go away. My name is Onyeka Valentine right here on BD TV. We'll be right back. Don't go away.